High issues today with honesty, integrity, a sense of humor. This is the Tom Becker program on the mighty 1290 Cool. Congressman Lee Terry is here, and he brings with him Congressman Dr. Tim Murphy from Pennsylvania, talking about a mental health bill that you're trying to get passed through Congress. And Lee, you're here because you're on the same committee, right? But
right.
Are you a co-sponsor of this bill, or you just
from the very beginning?
Okay, a co-sponsor of the bill, and you're in charge of the committee that is trying to pass this through. What responsibility does the federal government have? And I'll open this to both congressmen. What responsibility does the federal government have in rounding up mentally ill people and getting them treatment? I mean, if somebody is mentally ill, does some federal bureaucracy decide what the illness is and round them up and make sure they get treatment?
Do you want to start with that?
The answer to that, Tom, is just plain no.
Yeah.
That's not the intent here. That's not what's going to happen. This is for those occasions, not to go round up people that put bureaucrats out on our 10th Street at the mall or something. This is those breaking down those existing government barriers that are blocking people from getting the treatment that they need. That it is federal rules and regulations that are preventing that. This is about a family who has a child and then they turn 18 and all of a sudden all communications to that parent cease and now the parent can't be helpful. So this is about not about forcing people into something they don't want. This is about making sure that there's a continuum and access.
Well, we had at a forum that Congressman Terry were at this morning, one parent said they were told that unless their child, in fact, they even said, well, if your child threatens to kill someone, then we can get him in treatment. Almost encouraging the family. How bizarre is that? And we have heard that across the country where parents are actually told that, says, well, we really can't do anything until you make that threat, so can you please tell us your child's going to threaten to kill someone? We wouldn't do that with any other disease. And I want to go to your question about homeless. Look, if some people, and that's the thing, we have to understand that those people who are severely mentally ill and homeless, they may be out there with a different issue where they really are gravely disabled and they don't have to be. With treatment, they can get better. If someone wants to live a more vagabond lifestyle, that's a different issue. And what we have to make sure is we're not measuring those who are willfully living a certain lifestyle with the same yardstick as those who are gravely disabled because of severe mental illness. And understand that such persons can be 4 to 10 times more likely to be the victim of violence against them, of beatings, of rape, of assault, of robbery. Children with mental illness 3 to 4 times more likely to be sexually abused than non-mentally ill children. And someone who is mentally ill in treatment versus someone who's not in treatment, that person who's in treatment is 15 times less likely to be engaged in an act of violence. So we know there are situations, and it may be 1% of 1%, but why should the government be blocking treatment?
What chance, in considering the current mood in Washington, D.C., and everything else that we've got facing this country, whether it be ISIL, tomato, whether it be, the situation with our economy, whether it be Ebola, go down the list of everything else on facing you, Congressman. Where does the idea of getting better mental health treatment in America fall?
Well, sadly, here's the thing. When I talk about 40,000 suicides in this country last year, it doesn't really get attention. When we talk about those statistics I gave you about the number of homeless, the number of people victims, it doesn't really get attention. But wait till the next shooting, another Sandy Hook, another Santa Barbara, another Aurora, Colorado, and people will say, why hasn't Congress passed a bill? That is the sad tragedy. It's going to take that kind of thing to get people aware. And I'm telling you, Tom, it's going to happen again, and we need to prevent it.
You told me, tell the story that you told me off the air about your meetings with Vice President Joe Biden.
Well, on 3 different occasions, I had mentioned the Vice President about this bill, and he said, yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that. It's important. Let's talk. And then my staff called his staff, and they says, we're not going to talk about that. We want to talk about gun control. It is bizarre to me. That's like instead of treating heart disease, talking about transplants and stents and medication for heart disease and heart research, we just look at banning potato chips and fast foods. It is.
I believe Michelle Obama wants to do that.
Well, but to me, it's immoral, it's uninformed, it's unethical, and it is, quite frankly, it is wrong. We know that mental illness can be treated effectively. We need to provide that access for people who want it, to help families with that, not to create these absurd federal and state barriers to prevent people from getting better.
So your point in all of this is that you're trying to be a little bit proactive on this, based on the tragedies that have happened in the past. We've also got very short memories. It's like, like suicide was a hot topic a month or so ago when Robin Williams committed suicide. Now, okay, that's gone away. Now we're dealing with Ebola. Now we're dealing with other issues. And that'll be hot for a while until the next thing comes along.
Well, look, most people's knowledge of history doesn't extend beyond breakfast, unfortunately. And yet this is meaningful for those families in Sandy Hook. This is meaningful for those families here who had a loved one killed at the shopping mall. This is meaningful to families in Aurora, Colorado, and Columbine and other places like that. They want us to do something. And this is meaningful for those tens of millions of American families that see their loved ones suffering from severe mental illness and prevented from getting help.
Okay, while we're talking about health issues here, an issue that is, a campaign issue, but also a real issue, is the Veterans Affairs Hospital.
Right.
Okay, and talk today, story in the World Herald today, where they said, hey, Creighton Med Center said if the VA wants to buy the old Med Center, we'd be happy to sell it to them. Is that a viable alternative? Is that a good idea? Are you going to work to get the VA hospital moved to the Creighton Med Center?
Well, what I organized was a meeting with our entire delegation with the new VA secretary. And we wanted to let them know that there were options out there besides waiting 20 years for construction of a new facility. And they were very open to those, and one of those is the Creighton one. It's a very viable option because I know that because I met with the engineers that are both the company contracted to design and the new facility, but also built St. Joe's /Creighton/CHI, and also the remodel of that facility, 10, 12 years ago. I can't remember exactly when. And they're the ones that said, we know what the standards are for the VA. We can make those changes to the St. Joe Creighton facility for about $200 million, which is close to 1/3 of the price that they would pay for a new facility.
And probably at a much faster time frame, too.
Absolutely, much, because it's a different fund then, so they don't have to go down 22 other facilities before they get to ours.
Now, are you, as a congressman, are you working to make that happen? Or are you just going to the VA and saying, hey, we got options here?
Well, that's part of making sure it happens. So what we do is that we say, okay, there's options here in Omaha that our community, there's several options, including the build lease, and we got to make sure that they know that. That's why we spent 15 months trying to talk to General Secretary Shinseki, who never returned our phone calls or answered our letters. And then this new guy comes in, and within 48 hours, they contacted us.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So this guy's open to it.
Okay, but again, if you just keep on looking at options, no decision ever gets made.
You got to keep on.
Okay, so you've looked at all the options. Then you tell me what is the best option for the Veterans Administration and a hospital.
Well, they're going to do a feasibility study, and I think they would lean towards keeping that property at 42nd and Center, and they're looking at rehabbing. I think that's probably going to be a very costly one, probably equal or greater than a new one. I think a new one would be the best option. The second best would probably be do the property down on North 30th Street, north downtown area on 30th Street, and do $200 million worth of improvements there to get it up to the VA specs.
So if you had your druthers, you'd say build a whole new hospital.
That was our original plan. The reality, what counterbalances that is the number one choice, though, is the fact it's going to take them, we don't know, 15 years now, maybe 20 years before they could actually break ground, because they haven't started on a new major project in 4 or 5 years.
Is that because of the dysfunction in Washington, D.C. with Congress?
No. They've had their level of funding. In fact, VA was the only agency exempt from sequestration and had an increase. It is because they are overspending on the 4 projects they started 4 or 5 years ago, and the way the bureaucracy works is because they're running over, they delay the project out, slow it down, and then reach out into out years. So now you're taking 10 years of spending to build 4 hospitals.
Congressman Murphy, going back to your mental health bill here, mental health issues are very important with veterans. People coming back from Iraq, Afghanistan, coming back and having, whether it be post-traumatic stress disorder, other issues, having served their country. Are the same barriers in place for veterans that there are for civilians when it comes to getting mental health help?
Yes and no. So you should know that I'm also a lieutenant commander of the United States Navy Reserve. I work at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center as a psychologist and in a PTSD and traumatic brain injury unit. So I see this firsthand. One of the things in our legislation is to break down the silos between federal agencies. So when a person who's a military person begins to show signs of problems, the Department of Defense within the Navy or Army or something will provide some help for them because we want to get them back to fighting strength. But what happens when they go to VA, there's a problem. The medical records aren't the same. There's not a good handoff. Or if they go out to a rural area, they're not near a VA hospital. They can't get care. One of the things that Congressman Terry and I passed was legislation that says if you live more than, 40 miles from a hospital, you can
30.
go to a local, 30 miles from a hospital, you can go to a local one. You can see a provider there. That was a very, very important barrier to break down. But there's more we have to do to make sure there's a continuity of care. So this latest person went to the White House. They said he had PTSD, and there was obviously more problems than that. But also the situation of Aaron Alexis, who did the Navy Yard shooting, his combat issues too. I don't want people to think that because they have PTSD or they've been in combat, they're going to go crazy. That's not the point. Mm-hmm. They can get care and be better. But again, this bill breaks down those barriers, those silos between agencies.
What percentage do you think of returning veterans have serious mental health issues?
The low-end estimates are 10 to 12% if they've been in combat. Some who've been in high-tempo sustained combat, maybe as high as 1 in 4. That also correlates to the number of Americans who in a lifetime may have a diagnosis with mental illness is about 1 in 4. But what happens is the longer they go without treatment, the worse it gets for them. So we want to get them treatment quickly, whether it's through the VA or civilian sector.
All right, Congressman Tim Murphy from Pennsylvania, Congressman Lee Terry from Omaha. The race, we got to talk about the race real quick, okay? Real quick.
All right.
I know this is supposed to be an official talk about mental health deal, okay? But the race, it's getting it's neck and neck. By your own admission, it's a tight race.
Sure.
Okay. What do you see as being the issue that'll get you over the hump?
Well, first of all, I think it's my experience and my accomplishments, including all of the stuff that I've done for veterans, despite the false advertising to the other side. But also, it's just going to be, what about securing our nation? Who's the better person that's going to be more apt to be able to secure our nation, make us safe in our neighborhoods? Who's going to make us more prosperous in the future to secure our economic future? Is it a guy that raises taxes, or is it a guy that really thinks taxes and high taxes as a hindrance to our economy and we need to grow it? Who's going to be more about less spending instead of more spending when debt and deficit is such a major issue?
Okay, but I'm going to play devil's advocate and say, you've been in there for 16 years, and you take a look at all the things that happened in the last 16 years, I'm not so sure people feel that, it's gone the way they'd like it to go. And as such, how do you maintain and say, well, hey, I'll be better next time?
Okay, well, first of all, let's then get back to just comparing. So here's a guy that's voted against every tax increase then versus a guy that's voted for every tax increase.
No, hold on a second. You're talking about unfair ads. And I know that you're not responsible for the Republican committee ads that they put out there. I understand that, okay? As a third party, you're not responsible. But there's an ad out there right now against Brad Ashford saying that he supports taxing farmers and taxing this group and taxing that group. When in effect, what he was doing was working with a Republican governor to try to get rid of the employment tax, and then go with the income tax, the income tax, and then worked with putting together a more equitable sales tax. And he tries to work with.
But if you look at the totality of that, the history just in the last 4 years, 12 different times. So you can sit there and say, okay, we disagree on the one, although it absolutely did raise the sales tax on. But talking about false, I voted to close down the government. It's an absolute false ad.
Well,
so go.
No, but I'm saying there's enough falsehoods to go around here, and you've got the thing with Brad Ashford, but he's working with the Republicans. Now I understand if Brad Ashford was working with a Democratic governor for that, go after him, okay? But here's a guy who's trying to work with the Republicans, and then then it bites him in the ass.
There's a lot of votes out here where you voted to increase sales tax, other than that one.
Okay, but that's not really what they're doing
and
with that.
Property tax.
Okay, but with other.
So
they're making the same thing about the ads that you say are unfair, because you did vote. You did basically vote to shut down the government.
There were 3 votes to keep the government open, and I made all 3.
Yeah, but didn't you vote against one so that you could vote for the other one?
No.
No, there was never a vote. There was never a vote that you made
To close down, there was no such thing. There
Okay,
was no
but in
vote.
effect, it would have closed down the government because you knew that you had other parts of that bill that the Senate would never go for.
Well, then, you know what? Every day we pass a bill that's different than the Senate's.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is there's a process then, Tom, where you go to conference and negotiate the details. The Senate is the only body in Congress that refused to do anything and allowed it to happen. Did they set a trap for the Republicans when we walked in? Absolutely.
All right. Congressman Lee Terry, Congressman Tim Murphy, appreciate your time. Thanks for being here. And we're way late for the break. Cam's yelling at me. So we'll take a break. News from the Fox News Network and a lot more coming up here on the Tom Becca program on the mighty 1290 Coil.